True Dominican, I really think we could make it. But as a people, we have to learn to commit. Journey ahead will never be smooth and sweet. But as an ambitious nation, we have to be upbeat. I know we have done it before, so we can do it again. All the pain we've endured, but pride we have to maintain in order to create a better world. Every living soul has to play their role. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out the devil, stamp out evil, jealousy, not by me, certainly. We got to stamp out greediness, stamp out wickedness, jealousy, not by me, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day of our lives. Let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our lives. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make our country strong. Change, change. I remember the love and unity that we once shared. Starting from the home, the children would be prepared. Goodness was a daily part of our living. This society would be part of our children upbringing. We used to eat everything we grow and grow everything we eat. But smiling faces would glow and our people were real discreet. We need to go back to where we were. Otherwise, we'll witness things we never seen before. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out the ugly, stamp out cruelty, jealousy, not by we, certainly. We got to fight hypocrisy, all conspiracy, jealousy, not by we, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day. The rest of our lives, let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our lives. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make our country strong. Change, change. Grandma used to say that laziness is a real crime. It captivates your body, then retards your mind. As a people, we have to change this old attitude and give our country all the love we really should. Instead, we sit and we criticize, where we say let's now analyze and give young people no scope in difficult times just how to cope. It's us to build them the foundation in order to build a stronger, vibrant nation. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things. Yes, folks, indeed, an opportunity to change things around for the better of our country, Dominica. Folks, it is already 5 minutes past 6 o'clock in Dominica and the rest of our Eastern Caribbean. We are live here on the program called Civic Vibes. That is your favorite program each and every Sunday from just about that time. That program is streamed live on Facebook and also on YouTube and on Twitter as well. Welcome on board to all of you. Make sure someone else knows
that that program is on by you doing your part by basically sharing that information at this time. Today, being the 18th of August, 2024, and that is where we're about to make a start in just a bit, a very, very informative program with a very erudite guest lined up for you guys this evening. Without saying much more, let me just move across and say hi and hello. Greetings to Brother Alvin Thomas. How are you, my brother? Good evening.
Yes, Brother Lofty, good evening. Good evening. It's good to be back this Sunday to join the conversation again on, as you say, a very important conversation that we're about to have. I missed last Sunday, as you know. I was just getting off of a little celebrations. You know, you got to do something sometimes, and as a result, with the family, I couldn't do that. You know, I was fortunate to have been blessed with another year on the 7th of August, which was my birthday. So, you know, the grandkids family wanted to do celebration that weekend. And how could I negotiate that? I'm not sure. I tried calling you and see if you would plead on my behalf, but you didn't pick up the phone. So eventually I had to say, well, you know what?
You're on your own. You're on your own.
I on my own. But it is good to be back. It's really good to be back. And we have, as you see, a very esteemed guest with us this evening, which I'm looking forward to hearing. And just to say to all our many folks who have already logged in, a pleasant good afternoon to all of you. Those who are celebrating any anniversaries or birthdays, happy anniversary, happy birthday. And anyone mourning a loss, we want to say that we mourn with you and express, you know, our deepest condolences to families and friends. But it's another day, a good day. And how is it at your end in Dominica? Sunshine or rain? Which one?
Well, you know, sort of mixed weather, but for the better part, it is, you know, the sun is out.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, it's same here on my end. It's a 90-degree day today, so the weather is lovely. So I'm looking forward. And again, welcome, brother Ademola, and good to have you. And look forward to the conversation.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks for having me.
Indeed.
Appreciate it.
Yes, folks, please, as you gather around the information table from Civic Vibes at this time, like Alvin, I want to welcome you here to yet another very interesting program with you guys this evening. Just by way of information, the topic under scrutiny, as it were, this evening, it is the tenets of democracy. Yes, the tenets of democracy and the preservation thereof. We have, as Alvin said, a brother in our midst, Dr. Ademola Adediji. He's going to talk to us this evening on that all-important conversation, a man with a vast experience. And so you'll be hearing from him in just a while as he basically extrapolates on that topic here under scrutiny this evening. And we will basically narrow it down or parallel it down to our country and its situation presently, especially where democracy or democratic rule is concerned. So yes, folks, without saying much more, let me move across to a very special invited guest, Dr. Ademola Adediji, and say a special good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome to our space here on Civic Vibes. Welcome to Dominica by extension, and the region we know you're far, far, far away. Good evening, brother.
Good evening, brother. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for the invitation.
Happy to be here.
Good indeed. Can you just tell the listening and viewing public exactly, well, not exactly, but about where you are located at this time and the time difference?
Yes, I'm in Germany at the moment, and it's 9 minutes past midnight. Yes, I guess it's about 6 hours, 5 hours difference. Time difference.
Yes, it's about 5 hours. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, it's pretty late, but I'm happy to be here.
But you look wide awake, man. What's up with that?
That's the power of coffee, brother.
the power of coffee, and I want to add technology as well, because basically you are right there in these people's living rooms.
Yes, that's true. That's
so, brother, thanks for the sacrifice that you're making. I know it's a sacrifice having you up at this weird hour, but you know, it is our pleasure to have you on board. And again, welcome to that space.
Thank you, with pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. Yes, the numbers to call into the program. Yes, you can call into that program. They are 245-2396 when we open up the line sometime later, or 615-9470. Let me just, before we start here in terms of further comments with our brother here, well, just for the conversation, we're going to call him Dr. Muller. He has agreed that we just call him Dr. Muller. So we're going to have just a brief read up about Dr. Muller so that you guys could get a little more warmed up to just who is talking to us at this time. Yes? And then we'll go right into the major things. It says here, Dr. Ademola Adediji is an international affairs expert. He is also a senior research fellow at the Chair for International Relations and European Affairs, University of Cologne, Germany. He's also a senior research affiliate with the Canadian Network for Research on Terrorism, Security, and Society. He once served at the United Nations as the Special Advisor to the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide and Responsibility to Protect at the United Nations headquarters in New York. He is Nigerian. However, he has been living in Germany for more than 30 years. He attended high school and attained his A-level certificates in Germany before he proceeded to study political science, Anglo-American history, and English at the University of Cologne. He subsequently obtained his PhD in international relations. The focus on his research includes ethnic and religious conflicts, genocide prevention, responsibility to protect, and terrorism on the African continent. Dr. Adediji has authored several publications, among which he has published a book on the topic, The Politicization of Ethnicity as Source of Conflict, the Nigeria Situation, and several articles on themes such as genocide and conflicts, the spread of terrorism on the African continent, among others. Currently, he is working on another book that addresses temporary topics such as race and the practice of racism in various parts of the world, which revolves around the crimes and genocide and crimes against humanity in war-torn countries such as Ukraine and the war in Gaza. In recent times, he has been featured regularly as an international affairs expert on global issues on the live television news hub of Silverbird N24 television. Ladies and gentlemen, young people in the audience, it's again our pleasure to welcome Mr. Muller to the discussion here. Dr. Muller, just a brief read up here of just who Dr. Muller is. Do you want to extend on that just a bit more as we get into the conversation here, sir? Good evening again.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here on this important topic. Yes, I've been living in Germany for almost 30 years. And as you've said already, I attended high school here and attained A-levels before I proceeded to the university to study political science as my major and English and Anglo-American history as minor courses as well. So, and I graduated in 2008. And yeah, a point of correction there. I wasn't the special advisor at the UN Office of the Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Genocide Prevention and Responsibility to Protect. I served there. And many years ago, that was during my doctoral thesis. And yeah, I rounded up my doctoral thesis in 2015. I did a lot of field work as well, because during this doctoral thesis, I had to travel a lot extensively to Nigeria, to the northern part of the country, where we had, at that very time, the ethnic and religious conflicts that was devastating. And that was just at the beginning of the advent of Boko Haram, the terrorist organization. People didn't know it earlier on, but the time I was there was just the time they were coming out and getting people's attention. And then, and I did a lot of field work also on the resource conflicts in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. where we still have militancy, operating there. And yes, it was a very dangerous adventure, but it was very, very insightful. And yeah, and that's all about me. Yeah, if there's anything anybody wants to know, I'm ready to explain.
Yes, true. Thank
Further.
you.
I speak German, I speak English, and I speak Yoruba as well,
Okay,
my
well,
mother
just
tongue.
just give us a little German as we're getting things started here.
Like, what would you like me to say in German?
Yeah,
Good
just tell the
afternoon. It's a
people
pleasure to be here with
welcome.
us.
Yes.
Es ist mir eine Freude, hier zu sein heute Abend.
Wow, very good. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Und
All right.
danke für die Einladung.
Yes, indeed.
That means thanks for the invitation.
Yes. Brother Mola, you said originally you're from Nigeria.
Yes.
Just before you live in Germany, but from Nigeria. Just give us a little synopsis about that country in terms of especially about the rule of law and governance, and how is the everyday life for a Nigerian living in Nigeria?
Thanks for the question. That's a very important question about Nigeria, a country I love so much. I mean, my country of origin. Unfortunately, things have not been moving properly the way we would expect. Nigeria gained independence in 1960. It was a British colony and member of the Commonwealth, just like Dominica, and we are plagued. We have been plagued with ethnic and religious conflicts over for many decades, and many years of military rule, bastardization of the people, repression, as we all know how dictators behave. And since 1999, we've come back to have a democratic dispensation. And it's been actually a continual or a continuous, will I also say, progressive development. The democracy has really not been working the way we were expected, because we had the last couple of weeks now, we've gotten a lot of protest. Actually, people went on the street to protest as from the 1st of August to the 10th of August. And the government was really apprehensive. They were scared because they saw the uprising ongoing in Kenya, also spilling over to Uganda, and other protests in other parts of the world because of the Gaza war, the Ukrainian war, the protests in the United States against the Gaza war, and the government was apprehensive. So I would not say whether the protests were repressed or not, but many people tend not to turn out to take part in the protest the way it was supposed to be. And yes, we have, just like in any other part of the world, increasing prices of goods and services. And this is a country of 230 million people, and with so many human and material resources. We be exporting crude oil since 1957. But the people have nothing or less to have benefited from these oil resources. And we have also, unfortunately, our people they have really not enjoyed good governance over the years. I mean, we had military rule. We can say actually that we had a military rule from 1967 to, let's say, 1976. Then there was a transition to democracy till 1978. to 1976, then there was a military coup. Then another person came to power, a military dictator, also stayed there in 1979. Then there was a transition to democracy, and till 1983, then another military coup in 1984, and then till 1982, there was a short transition again, you know, to a government that was called, what was it called then? Yeah, like something like a transitional government. Then another the military coup occurred, and until 1999, that we had this transition to democracy that we have till now. Unfortunately, our people have really not benefited from the democratic goods till now, unfortunately. So that is what I can say about Nigeria briefly.
Yeah, briefly. All right. Yeah, thanks, brother, for such brief synopsis, as it were, Nigeria. Nigeria, most of the times when we hear about this country, the word corruption always comes to mind, or it's always added to your country, Nigeria. In terms of the corruption that exists there or may exist there, what do you have to say on that aspect of things?
Corruption, a very big word indeed. Thanks for the question. The corruption has really, to be honest, really eaten deep into the fabric of the society. It happens. How can one describe this? I don't know whether this is corruption again or a crime against humanity. Just for you to understand how deteriorating the situation is. If you have to be confronted with this level, with this terminology on a daily basis, corruption, and the youths are yearning for changes. The youths, they want to take over the government. They want to take the future into their hands. Unfortunately, we still have the old politicians who are still active. Some of them are still active, and where that could be traced back because to the long years of military rule, and those elites, those old people now who fought against the military governments, they still want to take part in the democratic dispensation. So they are still part of the game. They are still actors in the game until now, and we have a president now who studied in the United States, and we expect that he should be able to bring some changes. We are still expecting those changes, and but people are not finding it easy at all. Currently, it is not easy at all with the soar prices of foods and services. It's what the people I talk to, people call asking for money for help. It is unbelievable that we have really not gotten the kind of good governance we are looking for. I don't know whether I can say much about corruption, because that corruption, this level of corruption is not what I can describe.
Wow.
So we need a judicial reform. We need actually reforms in all sectors of the society. So
talking about corruption, Dr. Muller, does that name a former oil minister in your country, Nigeria, Mrs. Madwike, does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes, she deposited some money in your country, right? A lot of money indeed. Yeah, she's in the UK.
Oh,
she's in the
brought
UK.
some money down for
a lot of money. I was okay. We mentioned her name today, actually. Desiani Alice Madwike.
Yes.
Yes. You so when you look at the magnitude of, the amount we are talking about, then anybody can imagine the level of corruption ongoing, in that society. We are still struggling to make changes. We are hopeful that the future is going to be bright, because we cannot give up. We can't give up, and we have to. It's a continuous process. We must strive to make sure that we get the country on the path of progress. And in between, when the country returned back to a democratic government in 1999, we had very nice cabinet, professionals, technocrats, and we were hopeful that things will continue to be like that. But subsequent governments, yeah, things went rough again, and we don't know. I mean, I don't know myself, because this corruption of a thing, if we can get rid of corruption, then we'll be talking about a different thing now. This corruption, this terminology you just mentioned is one of the major obstacles we have in the country. It's not only in Nigeria, it's not only in Africa, it's we have, I mean, corruption is everywhere in different parts of the world, whether in the United States or even in Germany, where I am, or in other European countries. But the level of corruption we are talking about, that which has really eaten deep into the fabric of the society, will not allow any democracy to thrive. It's going to debar the consolidation of democratic institutions when you have this level of corruption ongoing. And we are yearning for a judicial reform. When you have an independent judiciary, that is the best that could happen to any country. People could be corrupt. I mean, but when institutions are working, I mean, we also what happened to the former president of the United States, President Donald Trump, who was partly criminalized, for some, tax issues and things like that, because the institutions are working. It's not, the US is not a perfect country, but the institutions are working, and we could see. We could see. And with what happened to, I mean, some people might see it as persecution, but it was, it was a judicial process took place.
Yes.
So we are expecting that. We are expecting that to deal with this level of impunity, so that people will not, so individuals will not steal people's money, commonwealth, if you allow me to call it like that, money that is meant for education, for the health sector, for infrastructures, and it will just go into the pockets of some people, and nobody will be held accountable. This is unbelievable. This is very exasperating. And I mean, people should be held accountable for this,
Yes,
and I believe
indeed.
by the time people, face charges, people are criminalized because of these illegalities, that will send fear across the board, and I believe people will sit tight. But until then, we are still yearning for these changes to occur.
Yeah. Alvin, just before you come in, let me just inform the listening and viewing public, those of you just tuning in at this time, we're talking to Dr. Ademola Adediji, out of originally from Nigeria, but is based now in Germany, and is having that all-important conversation with us here this evening about the importance of the democratic rule and who is to preserve such. Yes? So this is a conversation that we're having here this evening. Sometime later, we'll be opening up the lines for your comments, questions, calling, whatever it is, and also your comments in the live feed. Alvin, yes, take it away. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks for that intro, Dr. Adamo. But let me ask you very quickly, two quick questions. You mentioned you've been exporting crude oil since 1957. That's over 60 years ago, 67 years now. And do you think Nigeria has the resources, natural and human, to be, because with a population of 220 million people, that's almost the population of the United States, not too far away. United States is a little over 300 million. So do you think they have the resources, both natural and human, to make this place a place for everyone to be, to be happy and to have what it takes as a thriving nation? And secondly, what percentage of the population would you say are young people? I guess later on when we start to dig into the conversation we have, and we make parallels, like we saw what happened in Kenya and various parts of the world, what percentage of the population you would say roughly represents young people? And by young, I mean anyone, let's say under 40, someone like Lofty's age group.
Thank you for the question, Brother Alvin. Nigeria, like you said, for decades now, we'll be exporting crude oil. I mean, you must have met many Nigerians in the United States. They are in Europe. They are in different parts of the world, 230 million people. And these are hardworking people. These are brilliant people. These are intellectuals, both men and women. We are fantastic people. There might be some misinformation about a small, tiny percentage of people that might be, be involved in activities that could be painting the image of that country in another way. But largely seen, Nigerians are very, very industrious, very intellectual, very hardworking, and you will wonder, why is the country going the way it is going if they have this level of people, and we have material resources as well. We don't not only have this crude oil, we have diamond, we have uranium, we have Arabic gum, we have natural gas, even more than crude oil, and so many other resources. Gold is even in my own state, where my mom lives, in Nigeria, in commercial quantities, But there is a problem with the discovery of crude oil, it's easy money, and we are not even extracting this crude oil ourselves. Maybe now we have some indigenous companies which have the technical know-how to be extracting crude, but we have multinational corporations that will be operating in Nigeria for decades, and one might just see it like this: the country has a lot of crude oil, natural gas. But when the technology is not yours, at least for decades, we have the multinational corporations which are there to maximize their own profit as well. So when they come with their own technology and they extract this crude oil, they take a percentage, and then a percentage goes to the Nigerian people. The percentage that goes to the Nigerian people, you have some people that would, that will cut from this cake again, that nothing or less gets to the people at the end of the day, and it's so unfortunate, and we are just saying that there should be provision of basic amenities. People are industrious already. Even in Nigeria, people are very industrious. They are just yearning for good governance. Provide the basic amenities, and the rest will be history. People will take it up from there. So we have both the natural and human resources to make this country one of the greatest in the world. And I believe, I'm very hopeful, it's coming. It's coming. We young people, we will take this into our hands. It's coming. Just a matter of time. Yes. And many of us want to go back home. Many of us planning to go back home because we have to give something back, and to rebuild this country. And I'm hopeful, I'm hopeful that never before that the future is bright. When you talk about the
second part of the question, those under 40, what's the percentage looking
under
like?
40? I'm not really very sure, but that should be going to about 65 to 70% of the population.
Wow, that's a huge number.
Pretty young population, to be honest.
A young nation.
And the African continent is like that everywhere. Young population.
Well, we saw it in
no
Kenya.
continent can boast of that in the world.
Mm-hmm.
No continent can boast of that. So the energy is there. We just have to, harness, I'm a Pan-Africanist myself. So I see it like we need to bridge the gap. We need to build infrastructures to bridge the gap and make sure that African countries could facilitate, trade and commerce, easily. It can't be that it will be more cumbersome to leave Nigeria to go to Kenya than to leave Nigeria to come to Europe. It's because of the colonial legacy.
Mm-hmm.
We are still suffering from that. We still have these colonial structures in place, and which we still need to eradicate within the countries and within the African continent itself. We need to bridge the gap. We need to build infrastructures to connect these countries in order to facilitate the free movement of goods and services on the African continent. We have not harnessed the potential on the African continent itself. A population of about between 1.4 and 1.5 billion people. It's tremendous. And we need to, I'm a proponent of this factor that we need to harness the potential on the African continent. We need to get to know one another on the African continent, in order to mitigate these phobias, which are being established through the colonial legacy or the colonial structures, and I hope that we'll be able to empower the African Union to maybe it has to be reformed, it has to be more empowered to take its leading role on the African continent, and we need to make sure that we get infrastructures in place to connect these countries.
Yeah. All right, Brother Mola, thank you very much for basically giving us the Nigeria's perspective on things as it pertains to the conversation that we really and truly want to have about Dominica / Nigeria. What are some of the principles or the tenets of democracy or democratic rule as we get into things now? What are some of these?
Thank you for the question. Before we start at all, before we talk about the tenets of democracy, we still need to talk about. It's important to emphasize on that terminology, democracy itself. What is democracy?
What is it? Yes.
And demos, in the Greek word demos, means people, and the other word krati or kratos, kratia in Greek means rule, and kratos in Greek means what do we call it? In Greek means power. So we are now, if you match those two words together, means the power of the people. Or so to say, if you say kratia, it will be then the rule of the people. So when we look at this, when we look at the terminology of democracy we talk about, we still go back to the famous definition by Abraham Lincoln, who says democracy is the government of the people, for the people, by the people. But I find out actually while I was doing research on that word recently that there was a man whose name was Daniel Webster, who gave the definition of democracy in 1830, even before the definition of democracy came from Abraham Lincoln. It's just synonymous to the definition Abraham Lincoln gave to democracy. And it actually says a people's government made for the people, made by the people, and answerable to the people. So it's almost the same thing like government of the people, for the people, by the people. So for the people is also like answerable to the people. So when we now talk about the tenets of democracy, there are many tenets, or I call them democratic principles actually.
Yes.
If we like to see, and it has to do with, first we talk about participation. All eligible people should be able to participate in a democratic setup. It is very important that we participate in the democratic process. That's when we can only be successful, and we can and it can be ensured that we don't have any government that is contrary to a democratic process. So participation and participation means also voting, going to the voting booths to cast your votes, and also be voted for if you want to contest for a particular position. You should be able to vote and be voted for. So participation is very important in the when we talk about the democratic principles. You want
And
to say something?
And I would also want to think that participation there should be somewhat of a fair process, right?
Yes, we are still coming to that, because also we still have free and fair elections, you know. So when we talk about
we'll get to that.
it's still also one of the tenets of democracy. So equality, that means that's another tenet of democracy. Equality, that means everybody, no matter who you are in the society, your vote counts just like the vote of any other person. And your sex, your gender, your religion should not be any hindrance to be able to have equal rights like other people in a democratic process. You know, so that's the equality. It's one important tenet of one important principle of democracy. So we have accountability. It's important that the people we put in government are accountable to the people. It's and we know it's not always like that in many democratic dispensations and processes. You know, we must make sure that people are not able to abuse their powers. You know, the politicians that we vote for, it is important that they are accountable for their actions, whether positively or negatively, when they govern us. So another one is transparency. Transparency goes well with the election processes. You know, it's important to have transparency. People should be able to take debates. People. It's important that our people that govern us, our politicians, they go to debates. They let the people understand what their manifestos are. The people also have civic education about their civic rights, the electoral rights, and they are able to also to take part in electoral processes. Nobody should be disemphasized. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes. The internet is unstable. So, okay,
yes, we're hearing you loud.
Okay. So policies of the government should be transparent. The government must be able to explain to the people why it makes certain policies, and these policies must be debated, among the populace. There must be, reciprocation between the government and the people, and that's the power of democracy. People, that's why we call it government of the people, for the people, by the people. The people in government are being voted by the people. So transparency must be a watchword that is governing the people that are in government. So apart from that, we have political tolerance. Most of the time when people talk about democracy, people usually think about majority carries the vote. That is the power of the majority. But we must always make sure that the voices of the minorities are also heard. It's important that the minorities are not marginalized, and also their voices are heard, and we do not use violence to silence the minorities. So political tolerance, the opinion or the opposition should be tolerated. That's one of the most important tenets of democracy. Then multi-party system is very essential. It should not only be a single party. We have that mostly in dictatorial governments. A single party. It's not a feature of a progressive democratic government or of democracy at all. It should be a multi-party system, existing in the country. And then there should be control over the abuse of power. And that's when we can talk about the judiciary. If somebody abuses power, they should be able to be held accountable for their deeds, and and that's that area is just abusing the when you people entrust you with their votes, and you are in the government and you abuse your power by probably channeling government funds to your cronies, to private pockets. You must be held accountable. Those are those are those are destructive forces to any democratic setup. So also we have human rights. Human rights is very essential. It's one of the democratic principles. And you know, we have human rights. I will just add it together. We have the Bill of Rights as well. So the Bill of Rights, all these freedoms enshrined in the Bill of Rights. For example, we can talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. It's a Bill of Rights. We talk about the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights of 1966. It's a Bill of Rights. We talk about the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966. It is a Bill of Rights. So when you look at the contents of the Bill of Rights, those are in those documents, we have human rights that must be protected at all times. And human rights also is the right to vote and be voted for. So free and fair elections is the democratic principle. There should not be violence because we have elections coming, or there should not be violence because elections is ongoing. We should make sure that it's one of the democratic tenets, principles, that there should be free and fair elections. That's when we are talking about democracy. You know, people should be voted for and be able to vote, cast their vote freely without violence. Opposition should be allowed to hear their voices, to cast their votes for what they believe in, you know. And it's important concerning these free and fair elections to have an independent electoral office, independent electoral office that will be independent of the control of the executive, so that we can guarantee a free and fair election. Then also another principle is to have free courts, the judicial system. You know, the law of the country should be applicable to all without any preferential treatment. The judges should be independent. They should be able to apply the same laws to all, even to politicians or the voters. And it's one of the tenets of democracy to have a very independent judicial system. That's where it's important to have a very sound separation of powers between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. And so we can see free courts. To have independent courts is a very essential principle of democracy. Also, accepting election results is very important for any political party or person or persons who have lost election. In a free and fair election, if anybody loses it, then you go back to the drawing table to replan yourself. There should not be a way, it should not be a means to inflict people with violence, or to violate the rights of people, or to cause violence in the society because you have lost an election. You know, so you should accept it in good faith. And if you do not accept it, then you go to the court. You know, you use the democratic processes, the democratic institutions to seek redress. If you believe that your mandate has been stolen from you, you do not resort to violence. Go to the court to seek redress. You know, there have been provisions have been made already through these democratic tenets, principles, like we call them. So the rule of law, we have talked about that, you know, and like the rule of law, the law of the country must apply to anybody, everyone, without any preferential treatment. Nobody is above the law. Equality before the law. All these also are enshrined in the Bill of Rights. So we have also, if I still want to add one or two more, I think for now, I've mentioned many of them already, and yes, I think I've mentioned. If you want to add anyone to it, but I think I've mentioned almost all of the ones I've prepared. You know.
Okay, Alvin, I was waiting for you.
Oh, sure. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Dr. Ademola, for quite an extensive list. And before I kind of it sounds great. It sounds great. Between those, the question I guess remains: are they applied, where and how? And then we can begin to look at, specific areas, Africa, the Caribbean, Europe, and ask ourselves, are these really in work? But before I do that, can you speak a little briefly as democracy and the Constitution? Because all what you said there, the Constitution supersedes, one might say, or capsulates everything. Now, there are three democracies that I know of, and correct me if I'm wrong. Britain, Israel, and New Zealand do not have a written constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And the question remains, for these countries compared to, let's say, the United States, where we have a written constitution, Nigeria, where we have one, Dominica, where we have one, are this democracy functioning based on what you've just outlined better than the ones where they have no constitution? I mean, you see what's happening in Israel now and Gaza. They don't have a written constitution. Britain, who gave us a written constitution, do not themselves have written constitution. They have norms and all other stuff you could think of, but they don't have a constitution. New Zealand doesn't have a constitution, and they are supposed to be democracies. Can you speak a little on that, on the constitution and what you have just outlined? And then we will look how those apply in the various parts of the world.
Yes, the written constitution and the unwritten constitution. They have these norms and these traditional values. They've been following for decades, and it's functioning. We could see it's functioning, like you said. The UK, you said, is a parliamentary system of government with an unwritten constitution. Israel, I don't know. I don't know what, but the country, they are functioning. I don't know what to say about that, the constitutionality, about the constitutionality of the country, like they're written or they're not written. I know there are norms, and these are traditions that, when you have continuity, and these are rules and regulations of the game, and you abide by these rules. You don't have to have a written constitution to function properly, and we can see how these democracies are functioning. I mean, you talk about Israel, the Israeli situation, and this situation in Gaza is a different thing entirely. Which we will talk about later on, but this country, New Zealand, not having a written constitution, they are functioning. There are countries that have written constitutions, because written constitutions mostly also are rigid, also difficult to reform or to apply changes to. And some of our countries, which have these written constitutions, we can see how the difficulties we face at times. But we should not forget that we talk about our countries. We need to go back to the historical background of our countries. These are Nigeria is a post-colonial state, like many other African countries. And we are talking about over 270 ethnic groups, different languages, different religions. And you pull these people together, and you create a state. It's a creation. It's not by consensus. And you say, practice democracy. These people did not come together to agree that they want to practice democracy. So how, if that constitution is written, we still come to that, because many of these constitutions they are not people's constitution. That's why democracy is also not thriving in most African countries. It is like a post document, if I can use that statement. And until people come together to agree that they want to live together, they want to have a prosperous nation. Nation, that is it. Nation, do we have nation? No. What we understand as concept of nation, we have countries, constructed countries. Also, until people are able to come together and agree that they want to live together and they develop their own constitution, I am afraid that it might be difficult to obtain all these tenets of democracy we're even talking about as we see them. So you now see these countries that do not have written constitutions, like we say, and they are functioning properly. So that it shows us that it must not be written, before you can function properly. I mean, we saw the transition of government that took place in the UK recently, and it went smoothly, and nobody is, the transfer of power from one party to the other. And this is what we are saying also when we talk about democratic principles. There should be a peaceful transfer of power from one party to the other, peacefully, without violence.
All right. I raise it to provoke that conversation that we just had. And one of the other things that you mentioned earlier, when you were talking about Nigeria, you mentioned the word institutions. That if institutions are there, and you made the examples in the United States, I suppose that's another aspect. What I'm trying to, for the purposes of our listeners and folks who are there with us, I'm trying to wrap in the principles that you just outlined. And as I said, to see how it relates to us. At the end of the day, we must be able to say, well, hey, this makes sense to me, or how can I change from where we are to where we need to go? So speak a little about the institutions that you mentioned in a democracy. You mentioned some of it, like you said, the courts,
yes,
the electoral system.
Yes.
But give us a little more of your views when institutions are dismantled. How does that impact either positively or negatively democracy?
All right. Dr. Mola, that question from my brother here, Alvin Thomas, just think about it for some time. We usually take a break around that time. So we're going to take that all important break, and then we'll come back to you in terms of your response. All right?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, you are listening and viewing the Civic Vibes program. It is now 7 o'clock. We're going to take that all important midway break at this time. We'll be back with Brother Dr. Mola in just a bit, discussing the importance of democratic rule and the preservation thereof. Let's take a number from Trinidad from a brother called Sketty. He calls this one Jack and Jill. Very, very interesting number, really conversation we are having now. Take a listen. We'll be back in just a bit for your calls as well.
You're getting government money for so in your hand, but no transparency, bound to have corruption. Year after year, hundreds of billion you keep spending. Still we hospitals need more beds, medicine and linen. On the campaign trail, you fool we with a big boast that in government you would put country first. And now what's money playing, and you're ruling with an iron fist.
Check out who getting fat is financiers and your party loyalists. Well, on them state boards, oh, what a fiasco. Square pegs in wrong holes, confusion for so. A chairman of a board, I hear with shady character, bringing a container of chicken stuffed with marijuana. Then at Caribbean Airlines, Moon and failed miserably. Hundreds of millions in losses, taxpayers' money. Then you fired him. A big show just for we to see. So your policy on failure is to let him chair a next board at HTC. So politicians, all you stealing from the nation's purse. To make a difference, I say you got to put country first. Is you take the oath in front of God, the Bible, the guitar, and the Quran, then you lost your mandate. Look how you end up in corruption. Still we chill.
A very powerful number from the man Sketty from Trinidad and Tobago talking about corruption.
You can't practice the oath that you take. Get out from your nation, say.
Yes, folks, the numbers to call into the program, they are 245-2396 or 615-9470. These numbers are scrolling across your screen as we speak.
Could thief more than he.
For those of you maybe just tuning into the program at this time, we're talking to Dr. Ademola Adediji from Nigeria, but lives in Germany at this time, talking about the rule of democracy. Let's take another verse from Sketty and we'll be right back in just a bit.
All you had him like a god, cause he control big money. If they say he in corruption, you saying, it is so. While the whole country don't know it was Jacques who running the show. But now we capture your safe seat, so with him you have plenty fears. Is you say you protected the Lagahoo over them past 3 years. And now you're saying he was in racket. Misremember, you was the chief. But don't forget that the upholder, they say, is always worse than the thief. It's Jack money spending the election to kick Pandey out. Then he spent more millions in 2010, east, west, north, and south. And all the time he's spending his money on all you buy the lump sum. I never hear nobody questioning where he money coming from. But ungratefulness worse than witchcraft, my old granny used to say. And skates, never damn the bridge you cross, you might need it again someday. But now everybody pocket full, all you don't want no more Jack. But still Pandey must be laughing, at least you get one monkey off your back.
Very interesting number indeed from the man Sketty from Trinidad and Tobago.
To make a difference, I say you got to put country first. Is you take the oath in front of God, the Bible, the guitar, and the Quran, then you lost your mandate. Look how you end up in corruption.
All right, folks, we're going to take a check on Sketty here and get back to Dr. Ade here, really conversation we're having. Dr. Ade, thanks for sticking around the first hour with us. Very interesting information, I must add. We're expecting some calls in just a bit, but the question Mr. Thomas posed to you earlier on, would you mind, respond to that question, sir? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, about the consolidation of democratic institutions. First thing, in any democratic process, there must be continuity. And some of the democratic principles we talk about, if they are present in any democratic system, the institutions will be consolidated. For me personally, I believe the independence of the judiciary is very, very important for checks and balances. It must function. We must have judges who are of solid characters, who are well-informed, who are impartial to disperse justice. It's that. There was a situation recently in South Africa, and South Africa has been going through also a very tough time in recent years. And you know what surprised me? I was, it was amazing to me that South Africa, because of the situation in Gaza, could litigate the state of Israel at the International Court of Justice. I watched those processes at the ICJ, International Court of Justice, and I saw the high level of arguments South Africa brought up, and I was thinking, if this country, this country has been going through a very tough time with high unemployment rate and criminality, high level of criminality in the country, and they have their problems. And I found out that South Africa has a very independent judiciary. That's why they could do that. It's so for me to consolidate democratic institutions, there must be checks and balances, transparency, and you can only guarantee transparent processes here if you can fight impunity. Any forces, anyone in position of powers that are ready not to abide by rules and regulations must be held accountable at the judicial process. This is one area that we can consolidate democratic constitutions, and there must be continuity. Democratic processes must be ongoing, transferring of power from one administration to the other. That's very important as well. And the involvement of the people, of the populace in democratic processes must be guaranteed. We must make the democratic processes attractive to the people. It is their country. And there's a participation, like one of the democratic tenets we mentioned earlier, is very important to consolidate institutions. There must be checks and balances. People should ask questions. There must be freedom of press. That is very important. Freedom of press. They must have access to information, documents, and civil society organizations that are vibrant to take up any institution which is riddled with corruption or the allegations of corruption. We need a very vibrant civil society, many civil society organizations, to uphold or to maintain a democratic order or to consolidate institutions in any country. I don't know whether I've answered those questions.
Yeah. Alvin, any further follow-ups? Because I want to ask Dr. Adi Reedy.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Dr. Mola, thank you very much for your responses so far, sir, on point. We appreciate that very much. You spoke earlier, Reedy, independency of any electoral commission, free, fair / transparent elections in countries that are ruled democratically. So can you speak to that situation a little more in depth and kind of bring us where we would like to be enlightened? If a country doesn't have an independent commission, the dangers that may be posed there as it pertains to the rule of law and everything that goes on in that country, the independency of an electoral commission, re-elections.
It is that question is very crucial to very crucial for the maintenance of peace and order in any country. If the electoral process must be transparent, elections must be held free and fair. If the electoral process or the electoral offices are not independent of the influences of the executive, then there is a problem. If the president of a country or the people in power put their cronies to these crucial positions, positions, institutions, positions, because the electoral commission is an institution of its own, and it's very important to organize elections, and also for people to have trust in the system. There must be an independent electoral commission. And how do we obtain this electoral commission? It's through constitutional arrangement. That means even if the president appoints somebody to be I am a proponent of it that the president should not be able to appoint somebody to head the electoral commission. I believe, from my own perspective, that other institutions should be responsible to be appointing the head of the electoral commissions in order to make that institution independent of the executive. Very, very important.
Well, in our Dominica, so in our case, we have the Prime Minister of the country. I keep you hearing referring to president, but I'll join where our president comes in terms of the discussion we're having. In our case in Dominica, the Prime Minister, who is the head of the legislative branch of government, appoints, in our case, 2 people to that commission. The opposition, the leader of the opposition, whoever he or she is, appoints another 2. And the president now, which represents the Commonwealth that we spoke of earlier, appoints the president or the chairman of that commission. But we have been speaking about corruption and the embeddedness of it in terms of governance. What has been going on in Dominica, sir? It is although these institutions that Alvin mentioned exist, but for some, and I say for some, there's the sort of systematic, embedded, corrupt activities that go on. So although the president, whoever he or she is, may per constitution appoint that chairman who's supposed to be independent, but there's the appearance of this in bed, as it were, with the political directorate now in terms of these appointments. And so now we have a kalaloo, a sort of mixing of matters, as it were, and the end result is what we have been focusing on tonight as it pertains to the corruption that goes on in the country in very, very subtle ways, sometimes in very obvious ways. But we are not in Dominica, the majority of us in Dominica, we are not satisfied with the work of the Electoral Commission as an independent body per constitution. Even the chairman of that commission, sir, it is touted about. It is alleged that, he's in bed with the political directorate. A matter of fact, just to crystallize what I'm saying to you, sir, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, his name is Duncan Stowe, a lawyer by profession in Dominica, and he is engaged as doing business now through the CBI program, that passport sales program that is set up in the country. He is one of the passport sellers in Dominica. And so a lot of us in Dominica, we are very troubled as it relates to he being in that program as a passport. Well, I say passport peddler. Some persons may want to tone it down and say passport seller. And still be in that prestigious position as chairman. And so, he has to walk a very tight rope as it relates to doing the people's business now of free and fair, ensuring free and fair elections, and protecting his turf, protecting his business now as it relates to the perks and whatever he gets or allegedly gets from the political directorate. And that is the scenario that I want to put to you very straight up, so that you could now, start to process the situation that we have found ourselves in this country as it relates to free, fair, and transparent general elections.
Thank you for the brief overview of the occurrences there. I have a question, please. The chairman of the president of the Electoral Commission, what has he got to do with the Internal Affairs Immigration Services concerning passport racketeering? I know there will be a lot of money, going on underground. We mentioned Gisani Maduke Alinsin earlier on, that our former Minister of Petroleum. I believe she has your passport, the passport of your passport of your country,
yes,
because she brought a lot of money in. So we are talking about millions here, I'm sure, and nobody knows how many thousands of people have used this channel to obtain the passport of your country. But what has the president of the Electoral Commission got to do with these other functions? I'm just asking you.
Well, exactly what I told you. It is known, it is recorded that he is part of the system as it pertains to the pushing of our passports on the world market. He's an agent. And so there's this situation now that a lot of Dominicans, they have not gained the confidence in him as the chairman of that commission to be impartial, as it were, as it pertains to the work now that needs to be dispensed from his office. Because we know the other actors, those who are appointed by the prime minister and the opposition, obviously the partisanness, the political partisanness, sometime will come to play. So that is fine. We can deal with that. But the person that's supposed to be that referee, as it were, to set things right, I am telling you tonight, he is an agent of the citizenship by investment program in our country. And that is where things get really muddy as it relates now to his work that he needs to execute for and on behalf of the people now of Dominica, as per the Constitution's mandate, where free, fair, and transparent general election is concerned. That's our issue, at least one.
Yes. When people do not have a trust in the people manning these positions, what are still they doing there? I mean, in any system, in the so-called democracies we are talking about, if our democracies are still in progress, we do not have consolidated democratic institutions. We do not have we've not gotten to where we're supposed to be in terms of our level, our degree of democracy. But when people hear their voices and do not have any trust in such a person who is sitting on it's a life dependent position this man is holding, because when you do not organize a free and fair election, then the people's votes do not count. That means you are robbing the people of their livelihood. Actually, we can say you are robbing the people of their lives. That's what it implies. You are stealing the people of their future. That is what it implies. And I do not understand why such a person will still be in government, or why such a person is, with these grievances, with this dissatisfaction, discontentment, why the person is still in that position. The person has not resigned. That is widely seen in various parts of the world. We have this problem in Africa as well. In Nigeria, we have it. Probably not so conspicuous like the case you are saying now, because I could not just understand how the chairman of the Electoral Commission would be, is that his constitutional role to be involved in issuing passport? His work is to organize elections for the people and to make sure that the elections are free and fair, and the winners or the winner of the election get their results and they are satisfied. And the people are satisfied too because they get the people in government that they want. So if a man like that is now, I don't know, maybe there's a constitutional rule that merged the Office of Internal Affairs, Immigration, with the Electoral Commission. I don't know. I've never seen that before. But
well, Alvin maybe knows, so he'll chime in. Alvin is smiling. Alvin may have bestowed that role that you're talking about on Mr. Duncan Stove late, which I did not know.
No, I think what Lofty has outlined is one of the problems that we confront in, like we asked earlier, and I asked the question of institutions, and we discussed the question of the Constitution, and you were right. I mean, you have democracies where there's no written constitution, and work, notwithstanding the fact that they have their difficulties, but it works pretty well. But in any democracy where you have various institutions as we know them, like the Electoral Commission, the judiciary, the law and order, the Integrity Commission, the police or public service commissions, all of those institutions are there to safeguard, are their guardrails for democracy, a free press, as you mentioned. So clearly, when you have, I'm sorry?
We have a call on the line.
Oh, let's take the call. Let's
try to take that call. All right, caller, you on to Civic Vibes. It is 20 minutes past 7 o'clock. Go right on.
Yeah, Lofty.
Hi, good evening.
Alvin, and greetings here. Good evening to audience. Lofty, the brother makes an interesting point, and maybe one of the things we should really consider is that position, like what Duncan has, maybe should become a paid position. You know what I mean? Maybe that should be a position that someone is paid to actually run that commission, 24/7. Maybe that's something we should consider moving forward, because the capacity of the position and that someone has to worry about being employed otherwise and creating that conflict of interest, maybe that's a position that is so critical in our democracy that we should consider it being a paid capacity that, kind of minimizes the possibility of conflict of interest and all these survival issues, like in Duncan's case. So, I'm just saying, I think that might be something that we might have to consider moving forward, constitutionally.
All right, Zed, just turn the line. Alvin wants to chime in here.
Well, I don't quite agree with Zed, because I think what we have lost over the years.
I'm not hearing him.
Can you hear me? He's not hearing me. No.
Are you hearing him, Zed?
No.
Hello?
Are you hearing him?
Hello?
Yeah, no.
Okay, great. No, I was saying, Zed, that I don't quite agree, because what I think we have lost over the years, and that applies across the board, in one might say our Western democracies, if we want to use that, is a lack of trust, a lack of character, a lack of values, all those things that requires one to present themselves to serve in whatever capacity, whether as a politician, whether as a chairman of a commission, whether as in a judiciary or whatever. Because no matter what monies you pay that person, take, for example, the judicial system. The judges are considered one of the highest paid people. The prime minister gets whatever, I don't know if it's $10,000, $15,000 a month. And these people still engage in corrupt practices and do not behave in the manner that you should behave. So I don't quite agree that if you make it a paid position, you pay them, then they will do the right things. I think there is this tendency now where and I'm going to come ask that question of you a little later, Dr. Adebomola.
Yeah, just wrap up the question for Zed.
Yeah.
So he can.
Yeah. People have been acting on misinformation, and you mentioned the freedom of the press. What we have now, you have a populace that behaves on fake news, if you want to use that as another term, and misinformation. So whether you pay or not pay, we're going to have the situations that we have, where you have persons like, Mr. Stoll not behaving in a manner that he should behave.
Yeah, well, that's your opinion. I respect. I just think it's something we should consider moving forward. I given the fundamental importance of that position in our democracy. Anyway, thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for your call and your suggestion. Thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Adi, the brother suggested that this position, Alvin rebutted, if it maybe was a paid position, then the likelihood of this seemingly or what perceived to be corrupt practices would be sort of, on the lower ebb, the low end. Your take, sir?
I have a question to that. The chairman of the Electoral Commission we're talking about, is he not paid? Is it
it's
voluntary?
It's not a paid position. They get paid for I guess when they attend meetings, whatever that amount is. So if they attend meetings, they get, if it's a stipend or allowance, whatever term you want to call it, for that position. So it is not like an employed position. The employed person would be the chief election officer, employee of the commission, who undertakes the work. But the commissioners, who are appointed under the Constitution, 2 recommended by the Prime Minister, 2 recommended by the leader of the opposition, and the chairman is supposed to be appointed by the president in his own deliberate discretion. System as it is in our parts of the world is such that the Prime Minister and the president, because we are a republic, so we have we don't have an executive president like you have in the United States. So, but you find, and that is not only in Dominica, let me say that up front. You have situations where the Prime Minister and the president are sleeping in the same bed. So although you might say, well, the president in his deliberate discussion, but the fact that they share the same bedroom and the same bed, it is very likely that whatever the president is doing the bidding of the prime minister.
And that's a political bed, Alvin.
And that is where earlier on when I asked about the Constitution, because that is the dilemma we face in some of these democracies. We have constitutions that does not adequately allows for us to be able to. Yes, there's some things we can do, but given the experiences we've had, I mean, you mentioned the free press, if I may just conclude there. The free press that we know now is not the free press that we know not even 10, 20 years ago. Look what we're doing now. You're in Germany, I'm in the US, Lofty is in Dominica. We are using a platform called Civic Vibes to disseminate information and to help to change minds and to help to influence and to help to get people engaged. And that is what you have now, social media. And my question is, which I will wanted to ask you later on, is how do we now, with the onset of social media, how does that help us to protect this democracy? And how do we get our people engaged to the extent where they will stand up like they did in the past and say, hey, we want our democracy back. We want our freedom. Maybe we might need to change the narrative that we're using. Because back then when Gandhi and all these people were fighting for liberation and everything, the word democracy wasn't used. They were taking action that would help safeguard their democracy. But they were using words like freedom, protest, justice. And maybe we now have to use a new language, the language of the past, but incorporate it in the current social media platforms that we have to arrive at the results that we want to get.
Thanks for the input. You know, it's so unfortunate. This is a highly esteemed position. a position that determines a lot, because being able to transfer political power from one administration to the other is the goodness of democracy, one of the major tenets of democracy. And a position in which the prime minister is able to appoint his cronies, where constitutionally he has the power, is empowered to appoint anyone to that position. However, the misconduct and misbehavior and any corruptible allegations leveled against such a person, if that is really funded, then should stop at the table of the prime minister. The prime minister has to be liable for any misconduct that such a person has probably, the hardship such a person has caused the country, because it's an appointee of the president, of the prime minister. If you do not appoint somebody who is credible, somebody of high moral standard, somebody representing dignity to manage the affairs of the country, an electoral process is very, very crucial for the consolidation of democracy or democratic institutions. If corruption starts from there, then there's a problem, because people are going to lose all interest in the democratic process. It can only have a snowball effect that people will not go to elections again. When the election is not free and fair, or people's votes do not count, people's votes are stolen, and we have the same problem in Nigeria. We had it recently, last year, and in other African countries, as we know, and I keep asking myself, these are your people. When you go, your children are also part of the system, and you want to leave a legacy of goodness behind, that you serve your country with your utmost best. But
So
when you deny people their rights,
how do we change that, Dr. Ademola?
It's very important we talk about civil society organizations. What we are doing now is part of it, like you said.
Before you take that, before you take that answer in terms of how do we change that, there's someone on the line. Let's we can engage that person, and then we'll get back to you. Caller, yes, good evening to you. Civic Vibes, good evening. Caller, you're on the line. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening, Lofty. Good evening, Alvin. Good evening to your guest, and good evening to your listeners. Lofty, I just wanted to share my view on the position of the chairperson of the Integrity Commission in light of what Zed said. It is my view that persons who hold such positions have to be of the highest integrity. I do believe that position is a paid position, by the way. It may not be a highly paid position, but I believe it is a paid position. And what we really need is a government that will be willing to put laws in place to ensure that the persons who hold those high offices act in the interest of the people and in the interest of the nation. And that if they were to act in a partisan or a selfish way, or in a way that is designed to assist any one of the parties who will be taking part in the election, that they are punished by law. And so our laws, in my view, are not strong enough. Our laws the penalties need to be a lot more severe than they are now. Even the penalties with regard to persons who do not qualify to vote legally, and yet they are flown in to cast a vote illegally. These penalties are very, very, very soft, and they need to be a lot stiffer in order to prevent persons from breaking the rules and breaking the law. That's my view.
All right, caller, thank you very much for your view right here on Civic Vibes. Thank you indeed. Yes, Dr. Muller, back to you. Thank you, caller. Thank you.
Yes, Brother Alvin said earlier on, you know,
how do we change?
about
how do we change?
How do we? Yes,
bring
yes.
about change? Yeah.
This apart from maybe any constitutional amendment that could take place, when people find out about this misconduct, are people not going on the street to protest? Because it's their fundamental human rights to protest.
A great question. A great question.
Yes. What are people doing to change things? I mean, someone is robbing them of their future, and nobody is saying anything. These people have to be held accountable. You know, it's when people go out to protest that the media will be forced to report this, and the generality of the people will be aware of what is going on. It's important that people make use of their fundamental human rights. They exercise it. When they hear this kind of stories of corruptible activities going on, I mean, somebody in a very highly esteemed position, a position that determines their future, that determines a position that determines the humanity of the people. Because when you go to vote and your vote does not count and your vote is stolen, you have been robbed of your humanity. It's a serious issue. So why are people not going on the street to protest? Because it's not only enshrined in the constitution of the country, I know, because it's also enshrined in Article 21 of the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights of 1966. Right of assembly, freedom of assembly. Under it, we have the Human Rights Committee, which has made that position, that Article 21 clear in 2020, Human Rights Committee, General Comment number 37, that the right of assembly, freedom of assembly, is also the right to hold rallies, the right to can do processions, the right to go on protest, the right to debate about such important issue affecting the nation. So it's yes.
Yeah, Doc, I need to ask you a question. You had a stint at the United Nations. I want to ask you two questions therein. From the United Nations standpoint, do you know that elections around the world, for example, in Dominica and other places, that there is sort of a monitoring or observing of what goes on in those countries by the United Nations? And follow up to that is, how can a country, and I'm bringing Dominica into play now, how can we in Dominica sort of catch the ears and even eyes of the relevant people at the United Nations, especially where our election in Dominica is, and we are saying have been stolen times without number?
That's a very good question. There is this Human Rights Commission, because which is responsible is the group, is the organ representing the UN General Assembly in terms of monitoring human rights violations in different parts of the world. If somebody sees your fault, if your vote does not count in an electoral process, it's a violation of your right, your fundamental human right. Anyone, any individual can write a petition to the UN Human Rights Commission seeking redress for investigation. Groups, civil society groups, individuals could write petitions to the UN Human Rights Commission to seek redress. And apart from the domestic remedies that could be made use of, and in this sense, if one can approach the court of law, and it is believed that the politicians or the people in power will not let justice be served, then one turns international. It's the fundamental human rights of anyone to write to the UN Human Rights Commission for violation of human rights in his or our country. Yeah,
Okay.
we have special rapporteurs monitoring elections as well. They can be contacted as well, and they will in return activate the Human Rights Commission, but it's better to write directly to the Human Rights Commission. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for your response in that department. I know a number of people have taken note. Yes, Alvin, any further comments?
And any further comment, if it has to do, like people are attacked violently or they are grievous allegations, grievous violation of human rights, like people are tortured that has to do with serious crimes of concern to the international community, or grievous violation of human rights and international human rights law, humanitarian law. One can write to the UN Office of the Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Genocide Prevention, and mass atrocities. One can write to various special rapporteurs on rights of expression and right to opinion. There are many of them, various of them, which have been set up to be monitoring all the Bill of Rights, all the, from the first article to the last article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They are, they are special rapporteurs, that are being appointed by the UN Human Rights Council to be monitoring all these kind of activities, so that there is a focus, on the country. And I know politicians don't want to be, they don't want to be at the focus of attention. They don't want attention internationally. So that will make them at times to do the right thing. But it's important to exercise these rights. The media is very crucial. I don't know what the media is doing, but this is one of we are so happy that we have these social media platforms, to raise our concerns, to disseminate information, to talk about the ills of the society, because what we are doing now is part of civil society engagement as well, So it's important for people to make use of their protest. I mean, people should go out and protest. It is their future.
Well, what we have in one point, let me just drive home one point in terms of protests and Dominicans. What we have in Dominicans, Dr. Mola, is, as you alluded to earlier, in terms of the rights of Dominicans are being repressed ever so often. Ever so often, Dominicans, they are prepared to hit the streets, but they also have to take into consideration the very violent and brutal attack by the police in Dominica in terms of their brutality against people exercising our rights under our constitution. And that is one case that must be made, as you alluded to earlier, to these people at the United Nations and others, that they need to take note of what is happening in Dominica, because things in Dominica are getting, from day to day, it is getting worse. It is getting worse. And the rights of people are being eroded ever so often by a regime that will not relent, aided and abetted by a very brutal police force in Dominica that, goes all out in terms of a war against the people of Dominica whenever the people decide to stand and protect our rights in Dominica. So that is our reality, and that is what I can tell you straight up.
No, I subscribe to what Lofty have just said, but I also want to reinforce what you just said, Dr. Muller. And we've said so on this platform before. The situation that confronts us in Dominica and the Caribbean and small islands is not a situation that can be dealt with just on the local level. Mm. And too often we try to do that on the local level. And that is why I'm so grateful for your being our guest this evening, where you can share with us your experiences, the best practices, on how these matters need to be dealt with. These are matters that transcends the local politics, but goes regional and international. And you're absolutely right. The only way that the UN or whatever bodies, international or regional, is going to take action, or may want to, is if we bring it to the fore, if we constantly, and the fact that we say something, we communicate to them or report to them, and they may not take action, is no reason to stop reporting. We must continue. It must be an ever-ending, non-ending reporting of those issues. Because you are right, those institutions are there and they're there for a reason. And there was this Holocaust survivor. He was Eli Wiesler. E-L-I-E, last name W-I-E-S-E-L. Folks on the line can research him. He had published several books. He was a Romanian-American activist. And he made a quote as you talk about protest. And one of his quotes he has was, "We may be powerless to prevent injustice, but we must never be powerless to protest." That's a quote by Eli Wiesler. We may be powerless to prevent injustice because the people in power will do certain things towards its people, bad laws, bad institutions, corruption, you name it. But we must never, he says, be powerless to protest. And I'm saying that against the background of what you've just asked. What are the people doing? And the protests can be a 1-man, 2-man, 3-man, 4-man, 10, 20, 100, but you must understand that you have that right to protest. And that is where now we must constantly use platforms like what we have now and several other civic organizations. That's where the media and the press becomes even more important than it used to be able to do that. There is a very famous journalist, an investigative journalist by the name of Maria Ressa. And she published a book recently, Maria Ressa, R-E-S-S-A. And she published a book, which some of you can get to, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. She was from Philippines by birth, went to the US as a child, studied in the US, but continued her work. She worked with CNN as an investigative journalist, and she gave a historical perspective of what happened. We all know what happened in the Philippines several years ago, dictatorship and all of that. And the title of her book is How to Stand Up to a Dictator. The Fight for Our Future. That's the subheading. How to stand up to a dictator, the fight for our future. And I'm saying all of that to say, though, that you asked the question. And the reason why we have those conversations that we're having now is not just to come and regurgitate things to the people, but to help empower them. Help to get them engaged. Because one of the first things you mentioned when you went to the principles of democracy is participation of the citizen. That's the number one. So how do we get them engaged? And that's why I go back to the question that I asked earlier. How do we now engage our young people to do that protest, to speak up, to get engaged? That, I guess, is what we might want to end the conversation on. What do we do? And you mentioned communicating and reporting to the UN agencies.
Yes.
So that is one way. But whatever methods or whatever strategies you think that we can do to continue that engagement and to bring about the change that we all are longing for, whether it's in Africa or in the Caribbean or in Dominica.
You know, like you said, thank you for the question. Resilience, we cannot give up. This is our future. This is our country. We can't allow people to destroy these countries. You know, these are countries for unborn generations. You know, it's not only our country now, but when we go forth, unborn generations are coming and they are going to meet this country. And that's why we must get ourselves engaged. We must not only think about ourselves, but also about the future of our children and unborn children. And it is important, we cannot, since we were talking about the power of repressive governments, it's not only probably in Dominica, as we know, in different parts of Africa, as I'm telling you, it is not only even in Africa or in Dominica. The country I live in, to write something about the underdevelopment of Africa, if you know what I went through alone, I had to write petitions to the International Criminal Court. I submitted single-handedly 800 pages of petitions to the International Criminal Court. They responded. It is a struggle. It is a fight. It's a fight for the future, because we are not doing only these things for ourselves alone. We are doing it also to help others, and also for them to have a brighter future. It is our responsibility, not only our responsibility, our collective commitment to make sure that people exercise their fundamental human rights, and we enlighten them on their basic fundamental human rights that they must exercise. The right to protest must not be repressed. There are provisions. I don't know. I think it should be maybe it's either year 2000 or 2005 about the use of firearms by law enforcement agents against protesters.
Illegal.
Yes, there'll be provisions for that. But the thing is that whenever they violate all these rights, people have to report them, because it is when these things are reported and these people are held accountable that we can have transparency. We can have also a sound judicial system, because I believe the judiciary also will be taking a look. And when the international community gets itself engaged in such processes, people will stand, they will sit up. They will sit up that people are watching them from different parts of the world. Any activity, any actions they take have been watched by people also outside the country where they live in, and we are grateful that we have this possibility of social media, of this platform, because what we are doing now is to enlighten the people. We are getting the people also engaged.
Yes,
they
indeed.
cannot leave their future in the hands of corrupt politicians to destroy them, and it is their right to take their country back.
Yes, Doc. Before we end the conversation, just about in 8 minutes' time, there's another elephant in the room, as it were, as it pertains to the impediment of free and fair and transparent elections. And that is big and unknown monies, I call them. How would you speak to that as it relates to having monies pumped into an election that, can basically sway the election in one way or the other?
That's a very difficult terrain. The issue of limiting the amount of money that can be spent. I don't know how it is spelled out, in Dominica about, the rules of the game. You can see what is going on in the United States. Look at the amount spent on election.
Let me just bring you up to speed as to where we are in Dominica. Presently, there's no rules to the game in Dominica. It is, as we say in Dominica, you may not know that too, but Alvin will do it. It's like ban
movie.
Something about Uwe, but basically it's like old mass. Yeah, that's it, old mass.
Yeah.
So the last election in Dominica, the last, quote unquote, we had in 2019 a figure touted about that the Dominican Labour Party never refuted $70 million that it was said that was spent in the elections in Dominica in 2019. And we have in a population, Dr. Adi, just about 65, 70,000 people, basically $1 million per person. And it is not going to get any better in that department. So I'm asking you now, what are some of the repercussions of these kind of monies making their way in elections and some of the consequences thereof?
Thanks for the question. The use of this amount of money to participate in electoral activities, it destroys democracy. It erodes. This is one of the factors that causes the erosion of or weakens the democratic institutions. When you are able to bribe public officials and to manipulate your way through to get what you do not deserve, you are robbing the people. But it's not only the people spending money, but the receivers as well.
True, I agree. Yes, point.
And this is where the law enforcement agency, as we say, must also be independent, along with the judicial system, so that these people are brought to justice. When they are brought to justice, there will, with time, when people show their grievances, display their grievances against unscrupulous spending in order to win elections. When this continue and people, agitate for good governance, it's just a matter of time. There will be room for constitutional amendment, and there will be room for participation of the people to determine, and also constitutionally constitutionally to stipulate that so amount must not an amount that exceeds a particular amount must not be used in election processes. I don't know how the parties are funded. I don't know whether the individuals could raise money like in the United States. The parties could raise money also like in the United States for candidates to take part in elections. I don't know how that is in Dominica. In Nigeria, if you see the amount they spend to buy votes, it's unbelievable. So that's why people have been calling for what do we call it? Digital voting, and maybe that will give more transparency to the electoral process. But this is one area that destroys democracy. The use of money, huge amount of money to buy votes, to win elections. When somebody is using money of this magnitude to campaign or to run his or her activities, not using we know normally in a democratic setup, in electoral process, a candidate coming must have a manifesto. But if you are genuinely representing the interests of the people and you want to work for your people, do you have to use this amount of money? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves.
True.
Yeah. And when somebody is spending this level of money in an election, then all eyes must be opened, because something is probably in the coffin.
Yeah, and as my friend Lumumba from Kenya once said in one of his speeches, he really cannot understand the maths whereby politicians would spend millions, even billions, to get into office just to get thousands for their salary. Something
Professor Lumumba, a highly dignified person. I was supposed to talk with him two Fridays ago. We have spoken with him once in recent months.
I'll be very, very grateful to have a conversation with his brother.
Fantastic man. I will mention it to him. I probably I will mention. I will send a message to him. True. Yes, highly dignified human being. Yeah. And this is it's we need Dominica. It is important to make sure that there are more civil society organizations to take up the people in government and make them accountable. When impunity is not fought in any country, then it's business as usual. Impunity, if they can do this and go away with it without any repercussion, without being sentenced to prisons, without any criminalization of these offenses that they commit, it is, which signals are we sending? The populace in Dominica, it is important to wake up to their civic responsibility.
True. And that is exactly what we are doing tonight, in part, in terms of, enlightening and engaging people. Brother Ade, as we're about to wind down in just a bit, your final thoughts in terms of, as Alvin alluded to earlier, how do we get that change that we so need, so desire, but sort of leave the people now on a high note, a very optimistic note as to the future of their relevant countries?
It is important, if these civil society organizations we have just talked about, it is important to hold debates, public discussions, so that the people's opinions are taken seriously in decision making. People must be engaged, participation, like Brother Alvin said earlier on, participation. Civil society organizations must spring up. If there are not many, some others should turn up, they should spring up to their civic responsibility to enlighten the people, to let them know more of their democratic rights, electoral rights, the need to be engaged, the need to participate in order to have free and fair electoral processes, and especially for their votes to be counted. People do not know the power of being able to cast one's vote. One man, one vote. It is very important that your vote is counted. When people are aware that they are fraudulent practices and their votes do not count, then they will not take part in electoral processes. So there will be an erosion of the democratic institutions, and I don't know. But we should not get to that. We are resilient. We are living in a global village. What is happening in different parts of the world should be a concern to us as well. We have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but also to unborn children and future generations. We should do the right thing. We should be engaged in political processes. It is our right. We cannot leave it to others to determine our future in a bad way.
True.
So
Alvin.
Yes,
Doctor, they will come back for your final wrapping up, but let me just give Alvin that opportunity now as we about to bringing down things. Yes.
Well, let me like you've said, let me thank Dr. Ademola for a very inspiring conversation this evening. Based on what we have discussed so far, I have listed just 6 takeaways from that. And the first one is resilient. We mentioned that just a few minutes ago. Resilient. We must never give up. And I think that's what we want to leave with our people who are listening. We must never give up. He also indicated the second takeaway is that there needs to be a greater involvement of civic organization, and that in particular to include the media, a greater role for the media. An informed person is an informed country.
Yes.
If you give bad information, people will act on the bad information, the corrupt information. And we know how that can operate in an environment of a social media where we are.
Yes.
So greater involvement. The third thing that he said, and he asked the question, do people protest? And I stated what this Holocaust survivor said. We may not be able to, we may be powerless to prevent injustice, but we must never be powerless to protest. So we must take that into account, that we must never be powerless to protest. The fourth thing is that, he says, is that we must report those injustices to the international organizations like the UN. In other words, if this abuse are taking place and no one knows about them, nothing can be done about it.
Yes, exactly.
The only way something can be done is to let people know.
Yes.
And he said he did 800 petitions on an issue before they responded. So if it requires us to do 800, 500, 600, 1,000, we got to do it.
Yes.
Each individually can do it.
Yes, exactly.
Civic Vibes to do it. If a particular citizen in Dominica feel the right thing, they could keep writing letters to the UN and petitions. And if individually we do it, they will get the message. The fifth thing that he said is that we are doing what we're doing today. When we come here every Sunday, Lofty, yourself, myself, and all the many folks who are on with us, we're not just doing that for ourselves. We're doing that for future generations. I use the joke occasionally saying that I'm in the departure lounge with my boarding pass. But what I'm doing it for my grandkids and my kids' grandkids. So you have to leave a legacy of the world and humanity, or you want to see it.
Yes.
And finally, I think he says, one of the takeaways that there is hope. Change will come. As this famous song goes, a change is going to come. And that is where the resilience come in. A change will come. It took the Philippines 30 plus years in a dictatorship. He outlined for you what happened in Nigeria. They've had as many as 5 coups or 4 coups before finally they got to 1999, some sort of democratic dispensation, which still is not working the way it should. But they had so many coups before they got to that. So I think we can end on the note that change will come.
Yes.
Change has to come. And we just have to remain resilient. So,
exactly.
My friend, I want to thank you. Great conversation.
Sure.
We're going to bring you back again because we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more we can discuss. One of the areas that in a democracy, which we didn't quite touch too much, the majority rule and the minority.
Okay.
To what extent the minority has a say as well? Is it always the eyes? And that is what has obtained in our parliamentary democracies.
Consensus.
Our government, where the government has a majority of elected officials, and there may be just a handful of opposition, and anything that is put through by way of legislation, anything, the majority has it. So the minority pretty much has no say. In a democracy, it doesn't work like that.
No.
So I want to thank you. And as I said, great conversation. And to our many folks who are still there with us. And we just got to do what we got to do, man. Let's go do it. Let's get it done. Let's get the work done. Roll our sleeves up and get it done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alvin, for your final comments indeed. Dr. Ademola Adediji, you have the final thoughts here as we must bring down the curtains in just a bit. Again, thank you for the time. Thank you for the sacrifice. It is way past midnight in your neck of the wood, but we appreciate you each and every time and look forward to your coming back right here. Final thoughts, sir.
Thank you. I'm appealing to not only to the Dominicans, I'm appealing also to my brothers and sisters on the African continent that we must not, just like Brother Alvin said, give up. Resilience is very important. And like he said, that I mentioned earlier on, that we are not doing this only for ourselves, but for future generations. And we want to be remembered for the good things we have done to keep our hope alive and the hope of the future generations. And we are living in a globalized world. So what is happening in any part of the world is affecting other parts of the world as well. If something is happening in Africa, or for example, what is happening in Gaza, the world is feeling it. What is going on in Ukraine, the world is feeling it. And we see it through social media, through television stations. So we have a commitment, not just a responsibility, to make this world a better place. And we should start from our home, our state, our country, and the world at large. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Ademola Adediji, the man who led me to you, Dr. Kaiso, will be very, very proud of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You are welcome.
Have a great
appreciate
weekend and go take some nap. No, it's almost
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
One juggle your fruits. Don't give up. I said there ain't no giving in, mama. Rastafari guide your knife from the beginning. Why, oh, why, oh. Teacher not get paid, the government need for purge and process. Boy, police not get paid, so them find it hard.
Dominicans, thank you very much for your eyes and ears wherever you are this time.
Government
And to all the listeners and viewers of the Civic Vibes program each and every Sunday.
the youth to run it hard.
As Alvin said, and the doctor said himself, no, we are not giving up at all. And so who better to basically concretize that for us in song other than Chronix himself?
I give up. I said there ain't no giving in, no. Rastafari guide I and I, whoa, whoa. I said my people, we've been facing struggles for so long. Job people, please me, I beg you, please could you hold on? I know the system have you down and you feel pressed down like 50 feet. I got the buckle, yeah, the victory sweet. Me say me still not.
So Dominicans, till we meet next week Sunday, same time, same place. Yours truly, Loftus Durand, Alvin Thomas as well, and our special guest tonight, Brother Adediji from Germany. Good night to you guys indeed.
On the roadside, Babylon, so if you take up your bag and go, boy.
Have a good week ahead.
So we solid as a.
But no, we're not giving up at all.
I said there ain't.
As a matter of fact, when the tough gets going, you know what? We gotta get tougher.
I said the tough gets going. One juggle your fruits.
To all of you who made tonight's program, the program that it was, thank you very much each and every time for your eyes and ears.
Right.
Bye-bye. We love you.
Beginning. Why, oh. Teacher not get paid, the government need for purge and process. Boy, police not get paid, so them find it hard to serve and protect. And all we get from the government is highlight bits and robust taxes. And them still a pressure the youth to run it hard on the road with them robot taxes. But there ain't no giving in. Why run a taxi you? Hey, I said the tough gets going. Yeah. Nah, give up. I said there ain't no giving in. No. Rastafari guide I and I, whoa, whoa. I said my people, we've been facing struggles for so long. Job people, please me, I beg you, please could you hold on? I know the system have you down and you feel pressed down like 50 feet. I got the buckle, yeah, the victory sweet. Me say me still not give up, me just kiss me teeth, not give up. I said there ain't no giving in. Hey, how when the going get tough, I said the tough gets going. Jordan, believe me, not give up. I said there ain't no giving in. Why you wait? Hey. So that's the I still a guide I and I. Ooh, why oh.